Hello and welcome to my office. If you're interested in strategy in pharma, medtech and other life science sectors, then you're in the right place. Please like, subscribe and share this with any other life science strategists that you know. And if you want to know more about me, my work in this area and my 300 other publications, then there's a link to my website below. This seminar is the last in a series of 4 where I've compared companies that are good at localising their global strategies and those that are not so good. If you remember the other seminars, you'll remember that I called these astute glocalisers and naive glocalisers. In the first seminar, I talked about the challenges of headquarters and affiliates working together to execute global strategy, but also adapt to local market conditions. And the key lesson there is that astute glocalisers use affiliates in a much more intelligent way than naive glocalisers. In the second seminar, I talked about how life science companies allocate effort between countries and how astute glocalisers focus on markets rather than countries. In the third seminar, I talked about how pharma and medtech companies adapt their value propositions in each country and how naive glocalisers do what is essential and easy, but astute glocalisers build value beyond the product. These 3 seminars cover what it takes to be good at glocalisation, at taking a strategy from the home market and to make it worldwide. But in this final seminar, I want to talk about how pharma and medtech companies stay good at glocalisation and how they use their affiliates to learn and share lessons with headquarters and other country affiliates. Sustaining success is difficult because market change is constant and what worked yesterday may not work tomorrow. In a changing market, a firm's only sustainable competitive advantage is its ability to learn. So let's think about how pharma, medtech and other life science firms learn from and about glocalisation. And let's begin with how naive glocalisers try and fail to learn. You might have been to an international commercial conference. Key people from each affiliate are invited to a meeting. Most of the agenda is HQ communicating the global strategy to the affiliates, but there's also a session about sharing best practice between affiliates. In that session, the national affiliates are asked to share their In that session, the national affiliates are asked to share their successes and failures, although naturally they tend to focus on their successes. These successes are held up as best practice and the other affiliates are encouraged to copy them. This approach to learning feels useful because these are proven real-world case studies in your own company after all. It's like learning from a brother or a sister. This imitation of perceived best practice is the default approach of naive glocalisers. But this kind of best practice is illusory because it's built on the assumption that what works in one country will work with minor adaptation in another country because the company and its products are the same. This is often a false assumption because even affiliates in the same region can be working in markets that differ in important ways. I talked about some of those important differences between markets, such as competitive activity and segmentation patterns, in the second seminar. And this kind of best practice imitation doesn't work well because local strategy is being driven by somebody else's customers, not your own. So, if copying others is how naive glocalisers fail to learn, how do astute glocalisers learn from and about glocalisation? Well, they have 3 ways of learning: inductive, deductive and abductive. These are 3 very different but complementary ways of creating new knowledge, and astute glocalisers use them all in different combinations depending on the situation. Inductive learning is pattern seeking. It involves looking across many affiliates for similarities and differences in what works and what doesn't, and then drawing a conclusion about the lessons to be learned. So, for example, in one company I studied, astute glocalisers compared how different affiliates work with peers, and they found patterns in what works and what doesn't. They found that helping peers redefine how value is assessed is a lesson that can be shared between countries. In another company I worked for, they found that most successful affiliates were those that enabled discussion between professionals in different parts of the patient journey, and that practice was adopted by many other affiliates. Inductive learning doesn't just happen, it only happens if someone takes responsibility for it. So it works best when that person has the ability to look objectively at the successes and failures of the affiliates and finds patterns in their activities and outcomes. Induction fails when there is no one in that role, or when that person comes with fixed opinions and they let their cognitive biases affect their judgment. Deductive learning parallels the scientific method. It involves developing and testing theories about why the market is behaving the way it does. For example, in one company I studied, they believed that uptake of a woman's health product in Asia Pacific was hindered by cultural attitudes. This belief led them to two competing hypotheses. Either uptake will vary between affiliates with different cultural beliefs, or uptake will not vary between affiliates with different cultural beliefs. And by comparing uptake across a number of affiliates with different cultures, they found that their core belief was wrong. And this allowed them to overcome their old belief. I'll come on to how they developed a new insight in a moment. Both inductive and deductive learning need that thoughtful person, often in an HQ or regional role, to own the learning process. Deductive learning works best when that person is skilled at developing and testing hypotheses. Deductive learning fails when firms cannot make their working theories explicit, or if the hypotheses are poorly designed, or if they misinterpret the data. Abductive learning combines elements of induction and deduction, although it is a distinct approach in its own right. Abductive learning works by finding which of several possible explanations for how the market behaves best fits with real-world data. For example, the Asia Pacific Women's Health Company that I mentioned earlier used abduction to build on their deductive learning. They had 5 possible explanations of why uptake varied between their affiliates in the Asia Pacific region. Cultural beliefs regarding women's health, level of economic development, attitudes towards traditional medicine, education level of women patients, and commercial resources of each country. They then evaluated each of these 5 possible explanations against the quantitative data, looking for correlations. And they complemented this with qualitative research of focus groups, in fact, which looked for causal mechanisms. They found that the level of economic development was the dominant influence on uptake, but it was significantly moderated by women's education level, with the 3 other factors being relatively unimportant. Now, this gave the company valuable, usable insight that then drove their strategy process. Abductive learning works best when there are multiple competing ideas about what drives the market, and when firms are good at combining qualitative and quantitative data. It doesn't work when a single idea is taken for granted, or when firms think that quantitative data is all that matters. I've been researching glocalization because I'm curious about something odd. Global life science companies are often very similar in size, structure, and strategy, yet they differ hugely in how well they translate core global strategies into local ones, and how much value their national affiliates create for them. When I studied these companies, the differences between astute glocalizers and their naive peers emerged. As I described in these seminars, they differ in how they targeted countries, they differed in how they tailored their strategies, and they differed in how they learned from their successes and failures. I think my research findings are detailed and interesting, but I'd like to end by mentioning one salient difference between astute, successful glocalizers and their naive, less successful rivals. And that difference is in their attitude towards strategy in general and glocalization in particular. The naive companies think glocalization is just a matter of executing the global strategy. They think that local affiliates are little more than local concierges in implementing the detail on the ground. But the smart, the astute, exemplary companies see glocalization of strategy as critical, and they pay a lot of attention to it. And they regard effective affiliates as vital, value-adding elements to their global success. Thanks for your interest in my work. I hope these short seminars are useful to you, but I can only share the tip of the iceberg of my research. If you'd like to know more, then send me an email or leave a comment, and we can set up a virtual cup of tea. And if you think others would find this seminar useful, then please share it on LinkedIn and other social media.